had the $7 million beachfront, full floor apartment, paid off, Ferrari, Porsche, brand new, everything. Millions of dollars of paid off real estate, a multi-8-figure portfolio, and I wasn't happy. I realised really most of my life I've been unemployable. The idea of building somebody else's dream at the expense of going after what I wanted was just like not on the table. Most people see failure as personal, but it's not personal because the same guy succeeded at the same time in the same city doing something else.
A lot of my generation see these failures where people are just continuing to level up really as people jumping around and just chasing whatever they can, which I think when you're first finding your way, you kind of have to do that to find that thing. Welcome back to the show. Today we're joined by Adam Hudson, who has built multiple 7-figure businesses. And I was listening to a podcast with you the other week where you talked about being unemployable, and something really clicked with me. So to start us off, why unemployable and where did that all come from?
Yeah, Finn, so I guess we were looking for a name for the podcast and we wanted something that was really impactful and emotive. And we spent months just rolling around different ideas, words, phrases, and as they often do, when you're most relaxed in the middle of the night or early in the morning, the word unemployable just popped to my mind, and I was like, that's the word, that's the name, because I was recently interviewed on a long-form podcast that went for like 2.5 hours, and I realised really most of my life I've been unemployable. The idea of building somebody else's dream at the expense of going after what I wanted was just like not on the table. I really have been unemployable most of my professional life. So I'm 51 years old today, and I haven't had a job since I was 20. So I've had 30 years of trying to do it myself. So I guess that's basically it. It's really at the core of my own life.
With that in mind, being unemployable, what have your biggest lessons and learnings in business been through that journey?
Look, I think everybody has a different path to quote unquote success in life. Some people it's just sheer brain power. Some people it's dumb luck. Some people it's persistence. And for me, it was probably persistence is my superpower. And I was just willing to keep going. And I think it comes back to that one word, unemployable. My alternative was standing behind a counter somewhere because I came from a working class family, so I didn't have options. So it was just get a job somewhere and pay your bills, because as a man you got to pay your bills, or create your own job. And so I just kept creating my own jobs, and quite often I failed, but I just kept going and kept trying new ideas, trying to learn from the mistakes of the last idea that failed, and just kept going. And then eventually after 30 years I probably had, 3 or 4 businesses that really made some money. And then I took that money and I invested it well. And that's it. It's a pretty simple story. It's not one of brilliance per se. I just got better over time, and I think that's really the truth of my story.
We'll talk about investing a bit more later on in the episode, but I want to kind of double click on what you're talking about there with your failures, because a lot of my generation see these failures or where people are just continuing to level up really as people jumping around and just chasing whatever they can, which I think when you're first finding your way, you kind of have to do that to a certain extent to find that thing. Like you said, only 4 or 5 of those ventures that you've dabbled in have really taken off and succeeded. So do you want to talk a bit more about what those failures actually look like in reality and how you can continue to level up from those failures?
Yeah, look, I've had so many, man. Like, honestly, I always, I think back and I always look for good teachers, and I think the most articulate business teacher of this generation is Alex Hormozi. And Alex has a simple framework for assessing the likelihood of success in a business venture. And when I measure my failures against that framework, I can quickly see where I went wrong with every single one of them. The framework's pretty simple. The first one is solve a real problem, right? That's number one. And entrepreneurs are basically guilty of being eternal optimists. So they'll get an idea in their head and they're sort of creating a solution for a problem that doesn't really exist. So the first one is solve a real problem. Second is, if you're solving a real problem, can the people who need to buy it from you afford to buy it from you, right? And if they can't, then it's the solution you have is not viable. The third is, can you reach the people with the problem, right? Through social media ads or whatever else it is you're doing? Or are they like this isolated, unreachable community of people? And the fourth one is it a growing, stagnant or reducing market, which is obviously important because if it's the market's going backwards, you have to go forwards just to stay in the same spot. So those are the four tenets. So I'll give you an example. I moved to Los Angeles in 2011, and this is a great lesson for any young people listening. So the same entrepreneur, me, moved to the same place at the same time and started maybe 5 businesses over 4.5, 5 years that I was there. Now, of those 5 businesses, 2 of them became successful, 3 of them failed. Now, there's a very important lesson just in that. Most people see failure as personal, but it's not personal because the same guy succeeded at the same time in the same city doing something else, right? So it's not personal, it's that these failed businesses weren't as strong on one or all 4 of those frameworks, right? So one of the businesses that failed was a flight simulator business. So I started a business that was a full replica of a 737 flight simulator. So it was like sitting in the cockpit of a plane. And people used to fly them for fun. In Australia, they had them set up around the country, and I bought one to put into California because my office, one of my other businesses was an animation company. And my animation company was making a bunch of money, and I had office space spare next door, and it was right on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And something like 80 or 90 million tourists a year come to the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So I had my animation studio, all my team, and I had this vacant space, and I thought, you know what, people will come in and people will come and fly my 747 as something to do while they're on holiday. But in Australia, the pricing model was $200 for 20 minutes of flying this flight simulator. Whereas in Hollywood, for $150, you can go to the theme park, or $200, you can go to the movie world, or whatever it is, the equivalent there, Warner Brothers, whatever it is. Or you can go to Disneyland, or there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's all day, right? Rather than $200 for 15 minutes or half an hour or something in a flight simulator. So I, just wasn't solving a real problem. It was too expensive. And it was very difficult to reach the people because the only way you could do it through was tickets on the street, basically, So I guess, and I've failed at so many times where my enthusiasm and my optimism and not having a framework has really failed me.
In terms of those failures then, where do you start realizing that it is a failure and that it's potentially something that you need to reconsider as opposed to doubling down and then just continuing on this path of failure?
Yeah, that's a great question, Finn. So there's a book by one of my favorite authors. His name is Seth Godin. And Seth wrote a book called The Dip, and it's definitely worth reading. It's only about an hour. It's not a long read at all. And it talks about how to quit. And that's something that most books, self-help or business books, will not talk about. Yet it's critical, right? You've got to know when to quit. Everybody's heard that saying from Churchill that says, never, 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 never give in, right? But the rest of that speech says, unless you have better information, basically, paraphrasing it, new evidence comes to light. So what I have is sort of like a quitting matrix. And what the quitting matrix is, and I'll give you an example of it working, is that when something's not working, it should be patently obvious because you're not making money, right? Like you can look at your P&L or you just know, right? Like this is not working. So step one, just like in Alcoholics Anonymous, is admitting that you have a problem. I am an alcoholic, for example. In this case, I have a business that is not working. For a lot of people, that step one is just too much for them, right? But once you admit this is not working, okay, then the next step is to ask yourself, what are all the things that I can think of to do to get this thing to work? And just let the pen fly, right? Let's write it all down and then go back through and say, which of these things am I willing to actually result is? Can you see anything that I should be doing that will change this? And then go and implement as quickly as possible the list of things from both you and the trusted network. And then if it's still not working, get out of there as quick as possible. Just pull the pin, get gone, because you have to. In Silicon Valley, they say fail fast and fail forward. And Australians in particular have a real stigma around failing, whereas in the US, it's almost like they don't trust you if you haven't failed yet. Like, what are you doing? You're not trying hard enough. Like Everyone fails. Success is a game of pivoting. That is the whole game. It's very few people hit it out of the park first time. And so that's the skill, and empowering all of that is the willingness and knowing that it's not personal. It's just an idea in a market. You've either got product market fit or you don't. If you don't, you move on. And too many people go, oh, it's so personal and it's me and I'm the problem. I should never have done it. And then they go into this big story. And like Tony Robbins says, nothing has any meaning but the meaning that we attach to what happened. And different people attach different meanings. Some people are like, oh my God, thank God I failed at that within 6 months and not 6 years. Other people are like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I should never do this. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm just going to go back and be a job slave for the rest of my life. So those very, very basic tenets of personal development are so critical at these times of learning.
Yeah, and before we go on to perhaps everything that you've learned on your journey and what you'd do now if you were starting again from zero, before we go to that, if we wind back now to the start, what were these personal development, self-development lessons, and what was it that pulled you into this world to start with that made you not want to be employable?
Well, what got me on the journey was I was in a church. I grew up in a church. From the day I was born till 21 years of age, I went to church 3 or 4 times a week. Very, very Christian family. And there was really nobody that had any money at church. I was a really extreme sort of cultish almost church environment, but there was one guy that turned up one day in a brand new 911 Porsche. And as a teenage boy, when I saw this red 911, I'm like, hell yeah, what does this guy do, right? Like nobody had money in the church, right? Except this guy. And I became friends with him, and he gave me a book called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And this book basically was the first time I'd read a book that really captured me and it explained what a goal was. Nobody told me what a goal was. Like just writing something down that you want, setting a timeline to achieve it, and then trying to figure out what needs to happen and change. And it talked about thinking big and just the power of writing the goal, even if you didn't know how to get it. And I started just inhaling personal growth books. I started reading Tony Robbins, and then I ended up going to seminars, and I got into that world. And back in my day, Tony Robbins would come to Australia maybe once a year, and tickets were like $3,000, $4,000. I'd sit there and get buzzed, and I'd go to Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar and all these old school guys. And that really changed my life because I had no idea that I could have a hand in creating my own way. I just didn't realize that you could make your own job. I didn't realize that you could start your own business. When you're 15, you don't know how that works unless you've got a business parents, right? Like I didn't have business parents. My dad was a teacher. My mum stayed at home and looked after the 3 of us. So yeah, those are the books. And then, the bottom line to so much of it is just full accountability for your life. Like if everything that's been given to you, good or bad, that's the hand. Either play the hand or don't. Like that's life. And there's always going to be somebody in almost all cases who's had it a lot harder than you and is much more successful than you. So just get on with it. Nobody cares about your story. Nobody cares around the bullshit. Put the phone down for your doom scrolling and go after it. That's it. Nobody's going to hand it to you. And that's it. That's basically it. And set goals, get around good people, just the basic stuff, and keep trying. That's it. There's more opportunity, in my opinion, today for young people than there ever was in my time. And a lot of times people go, especially young people, they're like, oh yeah, but houses are $1 million now, and they used to be 100,000. We're screwed. And I'm like, bro, you have so much more opportunity than us, like by a mile. And if you're measuring your future wealth and success on the base that you can't afford a house in Darra or some shithole suburb in Australia, then you've got no chance anyway, right? Like you can make so much more money in business than housing anyway.
Yeah, and we've got Bitcoin to speed boost it as well, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Well, yeah, that's what they're going to say. I mean, you guys are going to say, your kids, those of you who buy Bitcoin today and you get rich, your kids are going to say, Dad, no wonder you're rich because you got to buy Bitcoin when it was under 100 grand and now it's $3 million. Any idiot millennial could get rich then.
Yeah, it is a cheat code, if used correctly, for sure. So, last bit on kind of your journey and everything to date. But if you were starting again now with everything that you do know now, would you do anything differently? And if so, what things would you do differently?
Um, I would pay a lot more attention to learning to be a good investor earlier. You know, I I think I probably misallocated funds. So to give you an example, I was in the US in 2011 and I got involved in selling products on Amazon. I joined a men's networking group in Los Angeles that I went to every Saturday morning, and it was 100 guys from the media, entertainment, tech industries. And I'd turn up every week, and some of the most extraordinary people would be in that group of 100 men. And there was no women allowed, and there was a guest speaker every week. And one week, Elon came and spoke to that group because his factory was just down the road. And this is Elon circa 2011, not 2026, where he's the richest man in the world. So he was already successful, obviously. He'd sold PayPal for $200 or $300 million, his cut. Just started SpaceX and Tesla, I believe. I can't remember the exact timing. So here I was selling products on Amazon and got to meet Elon and hear him speak to a room of 100 people. And I had a couple of $100,000 to invest. And guess who I invested in? Me. So I could have invested in Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, and I put it all in me. And I did okay, but I didn't do as well as what I probably would have done if I just invested in Elon and Jeff and just waited, right? Now the point is not to say don't invest in yourself, just invest in the most successful people. But the point is to invest. When you meet brilliance and excellence, and I knew Amazon was on a trajectory. I don't even want to look now, but if I'd put even 20 grand into Amazon and Tesla then, it'd be worth millions today, I'm sure. So I think that's one, looking back. And what I already said, like in business, it's about being pragmatic in your approach, not personal in your approach. Have a framework, understand the framework, and if it failed, it's because the only part that you did wrong is you incorrectly assessed your business against that criteria. And with investing, I think, on that side of it, it's always 20/20 in hindsight, but I could see Amazon made a lot of sense. I could see electric cars made a lot of sense. I could see Bitcoin. Fortunately, I got into Bitcoin a bit earlier and stuck with it. That made a lot of sense to me when I really understood it. And taking the time to go deep on certain subjects and really understand them rather than go wide and not know much about most things, which is most people on social media. It's the most people in the world. You're a Bitcoiner. How often do you encounter people that have absolutely no real understanding, but they have an absolutely firm opinion of it?
All too well.
Yeah.
Before I came over to Australia, we met my partner's sister, who's up at university, and she was asking about what we're up to, and I said something about Bitcoin. She was like, "Oh, Bitcoin's still a thing," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And then the next day, when we're on the way home, she texted her sister and said, "Just be careful, that Bitcoin thing that Finn's in it's very risky." Literally the day before, she just said, "Is it still a thing?" It's absolutely wild, but you're spot on. And just the last thing on this, because it came up as you were speaking. I know from the podcast I listened to you speak on that long form the other day, you're kind of really trying to declutter your life and focus on being present after what you've built up until now. If you did have the desire to build again, knowing everything you know now, what direction do you think you would be building if you had to build something from the bottom?
I mean, I would go back into what was my most successful business for me, which was education. So I built a community around something that I was really good at myself personally. So it could be, it depends, I guess, a bit on the outcome you're looking for. Like if I wanted to build a business that made maybe $1 million a year and had a nice life, that's probably where I would go. If you want to be a billionaire, you'd have to think of something else. It's very tough to get there through the education industry. Online education was very good to me because I'm a naturally good teacher. I'd go and study something, I'd master it, I'd create evidence that I was a master of whatever it is I was doing, and then I'd teach other people how to do it. And I think that's such a good business model because, you can do it digitally, It plays into the strengths of the way the world works and operates now, global distribution, advertising, all that sort of stuff. But if you're not a great teacher and you don't want to be on camera, I think there are other interesting opportunities out there. I think there's going to be enormous opportunities in and around artificial intelligence and AI. I think there's going to be guys like you that are young and hungry and dynamic, and you will use AI to arbitrage the fact that if you're any business that's in the knowledge industry is pricing knowledge above the cost of a Tesla robot, then they're ripe to be disrupted. So for example, my co-host on our podcast, Eric, he's one of 3 owners of the largest motocross parts business in Australia called MX Store. And that's a $100 million a year business, over $100 million a year, roughly $10 million a month, 170 employees in a huge warehouse in Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast. So you look at that business as somebody who looks at it through the lens of AI and robotics. Someone's going to go and say, well, look, Eric, you've got how many people in that warehouse? And you say, I don't know, 100 people in the warehouse picking and packing orders. Okay, well, what if we replace those 100 people with 25 Tesla robots that we onboard, we train to do the pick and pack for you. We can finance them for you at, $85 a week. They'll work 24 hours a day. So you'll be able to double your sales volume without having to buy another robot. And we'll manage all the infrastructure for you over a 3-month process. You can let all of your employees go in the warehouse, reduce your staff bill by 80%, increase your profit by a factor of 3x. Would you like us to do that? And you could almost send a Tesla robot to knock on his door and do the sales pitch, because the robot's going to have the intelligence of Elon and the articulation of an athlete. So the physical reticulation, of an athlete. So I think, that's just an idea of some young dynamic thinkers that we specialize in replacing warehouse staff bases. We get robots, we use this software to do pick and packs, we integrate them, and we charge a management fee, and we handle all the financing. So that's one idea. But there's, you could start a law firm today with, 50 AIs and 1 human lawyer. There's just so much disruption in labour, and that's what Tesla's really doing. Tesla's not a car company, they're an AI company, and what they're arbitraging is the global labour force, which I believe is a $100 trillion market. And so there's huge opportunities there.
Yeah, there's massive opportunities, but there's also massive disruption that's going to come from that. So let's keep going down this rabbit hole. Where do you see the world heading for the majority of people that are employed, that are just going about their day of waking up, going to work, coming home, having a beer on the couch or whatever they do, in this world where AI and robots are taking over heaps of jobs? What do these people, what do they need to be doing?
It's a very interesting question. I do see a world where governments will start taxing on every job that gets lost to robotics and AI. And those taxes will go towards some form of social support, because I think, for example, Eric's business, just one of millions of them like that around the world, it just makes sense that a robot is better at doing that job of picking and packing by all measurable metrics. No HR required, no sexual harassment claims, no workplace injuries, no HR manager required. They work 24/7.
No sick days.
They never call in sick. They never try to screw you with workplace legislation as an employer, which happens. It's rampant in Australia. Fraud. Staff members that think nothing of chucking a sickie, which is another way of saying stealing money from the boss's family, which is really what it is. Australians have no compunction about that at all. Just industrial scale theft that's, socially normalised. So I think there's going to be some form of government intervention around job replacement. I think there will be jobs in the space, servicing robots and working around them. But I think this argument that it's all going to come out in the wash and there'll be just as many jobs as before, I don't actually agree with that. I think it sounds good and makes people feel good. But I've been to an Amazon warehouse I've been to many of them in the States, and these are 1.5 to 2 million square foot facilities with 15 miles, so 25 kilometers of conveyor belts inside a building, which is just hard to even process.
Wild, yeah.
And in the centralized pick and pack area, they have the Kiva robots. It's like a football field with these little robots that are about 1 meter by 1 meter and about this tall, about 1 foot tall, maybe a little bit less. And when an order comes in from an app from Amazon.com, it instantly routes the order to the warehouse that has that item in stock closest to where the customer is. And within a few seconds, there is a Kiva robot mobilized. And those robots have a 4-sided shelving system stacked on top of them with bins on all of them. That Kiva robot with the item in it, the robot knows which side of the shelving it's on, it knows which bin it's in. It drives itself to the edge of the pen where there's a picker and packer and there's a laser in the roof that points at the bin. They pull the bin and then they have a computer screen there that shows them what the item looks like. Open the bin, they confirm it's the same thing, they pull it out, hit the green button and on the conveyor belt, and that's it. And every 5 seconds or so, there's a new Kiva robot turning up to the picker and packer from inside the football field of products that are stacked onto those things. You know, you can't tell me that that's not a job loss. It is job losses, right? So that's going to be at scale across everything. You know, I think law firms are going to downscale, knowledge workers are going to downscale, consultancy firms are already seeing it. So I don't know the answer. They're going to have to go into some kind of business themselves. New industries will open. I'm just not sure at the moment. I'm thinking about it. I mean, I've opened my phone this year, Finn, and I look at Instagram, and every time I look at anything now, I'm going, is this real or is this not real? And where's that going to be in 12 months when you pick up your social media and you really do not know what is real and what's not anymore? What's the point of picking it up, right? So what are the second and third order consequences of that? Someone will say AI-free Instagram version. That will probably be an emerging platform that someone will create and make $1 billion out of, right? Or technology that detects without any, fault. It probably already is there to some degree, but there's going to be all these kinds of opportunities, but it'll only be opportunities for the few, but those that blow up will create jobs. But again, a lot of those jobs in those new businesses are going to be AI as well.
Yeah, I've got a podcast with Jeff Booth this week, actually, to ask him a bunch of questions about that, because he's pretty vocal on the way of AI and how that's going to look into the future. I just think there's so many people drifting at the moment that are completely unaware of these things that are already present, but they still think a year's off, but they're already here. And it's the next thing that exponentially is going to just keep coming, and it's going to look very, very different. And I listened to a podcast quite a while ago now, but it talks about purpose and what happens when people at mass suddenly have no purpose. And I think a lot of people currently, their purpose is to survive. Have you thought much about this? And then, I mean, listening to your podcast last week, your purpose sounds like it's changed a lot in the last couple of years. How have you dealt with that shift of purpose, and what's kept you kind of pushing forwards despite kind of a change of trajectory with a lot of things?
Yeah, look, Finn, I think you've caught me in a very transitionary, if that's a word, time in my life. Like I really am in the throes of it as we speak. Like up until 2 years ago, it was all about business and goals. When I say goals, I mean of the material accomplishment, Western mind kind of life. And for those who don't know my story, I turned 50 and I had all the stuff. I had the $7 million beachfront, full floor apartment, paid off, Ferrari, Porsche, brand new, everything, millions of dollars of paid off real estate, a multi 8-figure portfolio, and I wasn't happy. And people are like, how the hell can you not be happy, dude? But when I looked in the mirror, the truth was I wasn't happy. It just wasn't filling my soul. And then when I turned 50, I was like, do I want to spend another 5 years, 10 years chasing more money, more financial goals? And I'd gotten to a point where there was literally nothing that would excite me. Now, some people would say, well, you didn't have a jet yet, bro. Like, you didn't really make it. I'm like, dude, I don't need a jet. I'm good. Like, I had the nice cars. I had the beautiful home. Like, everybody who comes to my home would be like, oh my God, this is stunning. Full floor, right on the sand, no beach in front, brand new building, richest people on the Gold Coast in my building, all that stuff. But I just wasn't alive. I wasn't feeling great. And so I'd spent my whole life in the West and pursuing Western ideals and Western goals. And so I guess I started that journey 2 years ago of trying to discover a more meaningful existence for myself. And I'm still getting there, right? Like, I've done a lot of travel. Like, I've been all over the world, and I've done it, I've spent 30, 40 grand a week on a hotel. I've done all the crazy stuff. I fly at the front of the plane. And none of that actually, the stuff side of it, brings you joy. The experiences do, though. The meeting of the people, the being present. Like, I just had breakfast before I spoke to you here. It's 9 o'clock in the morning here now, but at 7:30 I was at my favourite cafe here in Bali, which is called Alchemy. And I'm sitting there and they made me a fresh smoothie bowl with organic food in it. And I'll sit and just take it in for a minute and then just notice the greenery and notice the birds and connect with the world around me and notice the server. This kind of slower living has brought me a sense of connectedness with the world again and with people and joy. And then I'll just get back on my little scooter, which I rent. I don't own a car anymore. And I find more joy in that hour than I would find back home living in Australia with all the flex stuff, which just did nothing for me. I was driving around in a stressful environment, stressful people around me, everybody trying to one-up the next guy, and that's just gone now. Now I just invest, talk to people like you. I'm building a home over here at the moment, and I'm just trying to find joy in the actual real things that present themselves in my life every day and live in a place where I feel good. Like, a lot of people say, Bali's a shithole, why would you spend time in Bali? And I'm like, actually, it's a place of smoke and magic and beauty and mystery, and it's a wonderful place if you're present. But it's not beautiful in the sense of the roads are pristine and there's no dog shit everywhere and stuff like that. But there's a real magic and spirituality to the place that really connects with you in a different way.
It's super interesting to hear. And I've seen a lot of people that, like you said, they're on paper, they're super successful. And then they hit this ceiling almost where they like realize that they've done everything that they could ever have dreamed of. And then they're almost on this new journey of decluttering, and I think it's prevalent in the Bitcoin space because you can literally just put everything into Bitcoin and own nothing except some words in your head, which is cool. But you just reminded me of one of the questions that came up when I was watching your previous podcast. Is I've run into this a lot where I'm all or nothing, so I will go to the point of kind of burning myself out, but then when I do burn out or step back a bit and look at the bigger vision and picture, my vision isn't this go lifestyle. It is the sovereign kind of slow life that you've just been describing, that you're kind of trying to head towards now. So I know you're still navigating it yourself, but with what you do know, let's say someone in my situation that hasn't by any means made it, but they want to be successful and be a provider in their future, but they don't want to live this go lifestyle. Do you think there always has to be this element of go to then live the sovereign life? Or what would your recommendations be there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Finn, and I think I don't want my little story there to be construed as it's not worth doing or you shouldn't do it. You should. Like, while you're young and driven and you really want to prove it to yourself, like every successful entrepreneur I've ever invested in, I always look for the chip on their shoulder. The bigger the chip, like I have a saying, chips turn into chips, because you want that guy or that girl who wants to prove something to the world. So there's nothing wrong with pursuing financial success, and there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that it's much better to do your discovery with money than broke. So I'm here in Bali and I see lots of young guys doing the discovery, but they've got no money. So they can't sustain it. They look incredible, they're at the gym, but when they leave the gym, they're like, all right, I got to get on my hustle now. And they're stressed and they're anxious, whereas I could stay here for the rest of my life and never have to worry about money for the rest of my life, especially if I just stayed in Bali. Jesus, I could live 100 lifetimes here. So there's nothing wrong with going after it, and enjoying that. I would just say make sure you do enjoy the simple things as well, a little bit along the way. Don't be in too much of a rush, So there's nothing wrong with, anyway, in short, there's nothing wrong with pursuing financial success. But I'm saying it from the place of having achieved financial success and now you go on a different journey. It's just another part of it.
Yeah. And this is probably the longest podcast episode I've done where we've not really talked about Bitcoin at all yet, but I think it's a good time to introduce it because what Bitcoin does allow, and it goes back to what you kind of said earlier on in that podcast, is yes, you've got to invest in yourself and upskill yourself, but investing at the same time is also important. And for me, when I found Bitcoin was just as I'd started my first online knee rehab business. I was living at home with my partner's parents. I had no expenses. So all of my revenue pretty much was just getting pummeled into Bitcoin. And it coincided where suddenly like I'm almost earning more from that money than I was earning from the business itself. That then allows you to have more time to make decisions on what these next steps are. You said you got into Bitcoin fairly early. I'm not sure how early that is. What was it that just clicked for you that you were like, this Bitcoin thing needs more of my attention and is the real deal?
I think for me, as an entrepreneur and an investor, I'm always looking for things that fit that framework that I talked about. Is it a real problem? Can people afford it? Can you reach the people? And is it a growing market? And if you put Bitcoin in that context, is there a problem? Is there a problem with the technology that humans beings use to store their economic value? That is the first question using Alex Hormozi's model, right? So Saylor talks about money like a battery. So we go to work and we exchange our time for these tokens that we call Australian dollars, British pounds, American dollars. We spend those tokens in the marketplace. Most people spend most of them every week. And then whatever we've got left over that we want to store for our future goes into a bank and it stays in the form of that fiat currency. And it's a very, very basic and important question to consider deeply for anybody listening to this podcast. First of all, what did you give up to get the token? And the answer is time. Okay, so what is time? Time is a piece of the sacred. It is a piece of the spiritual gift that is beyond mankind and human law and government. It is what has been granted to you by whatever God squares your moon, right? That is yours. And so if you give up that and you get given this man-made token, one would expect that if we are talking at it from an integrity point of view, a moral point of view, that token should be able to be exchanged back for the same amount of value in the future as the time that you expended this most precious resource of yours. But we all know that fiat-based systems actually rely upon inflation. That's how they are engineered. So it will always be that they're going to print more money and your buying power is going to be reduced. That is the fundamental driving force of Keynesian economics. And so Keynesian economics. So is that a broken system? Yes or no? Well, the answer is clearly yes, because the nurse, the student, the teacher, these good people in our communities that we need for the low-paying, essential jobs are the ones getting killed the most. And they're the ones that we need to protect the most, right? Otherwise, what happens is inflation ruins lives. When the money's broken, it ruins lives. How? When I grew up, my dad could raise 3 boys in a home that he could buy on a single working family wage. My dad was a teacher and mum stayed at home. It was tight, but we could do it because houses were under 100 grand. The first house my dad bought that I can remember was $38,500 in Canberra. $38,500. So he could afford that house on a teacher's salary, and he had time, and he's had time to be with the boys and all that. Today, not only 2 wages aren't doing it, you need childcare on top. So the kids are growing up today with absent parents. Not only are they absent, they're stressed, right? So the quality of life for young people's children today is majorly different to what it was when we had single parent, one parent at home looking after the kids full time. It's great to be a kid when I grew up. Kids today grow up in a higher level of divorce, absent parents, all this. So I looked at it and went, okay, here's the biggest of all problems in the world, which is money. Money drives everything, right? Money is essential globally. It is the biggest asset, the biggest product that there is, and it's seriously broken, right? And so when it clicked for me was when I really understood what Bitcoin is that it is decentralized, free of government. All these things that we know and love about Bitcoin cannot be corrupted, cannot be coerced, cannot be co-opted. I can store it, it's in cold storage. If I don't like the government under which I live, I can leave and take my economic power with me. It is deflationary in nature as opposed to inflationary, and it can't be used as a tool against me. So free speech is a massive value of mine. The ability for people to be able to say whatever they want, even if I don't agree with it, you can say it. And I see a world now where, especially Australia, who are the world leaders in censorship now, they're going to censor you, or they're going to censor the platforms if they don't like what you're saying. What's the easiest way to assert power into a working man's life or a working woman's life? Censor their money. Finn, if you don't stop this YouTube channel, we're going to demonetize you. Finn, if you don't stop this YouTube channel, we're going to freeze your bank accounts. And guess what Finn's going to do? He's going to comply because he needs money, because he has a wife and he has kids that need to be fed. But not this Finn, because this Finn has Bitcoin, and so he just picks up, moves to Bali and gives him the middle finger and says, I'm good. Later. That's what it's about. And then you ask the question, how big is the addressable market for broken money? It's everyone. Everybody uses money in this world every day. Some people drive Teslas, some people buy from Amazon, but everybody uses money, and everybody's money is broken. Not some people's, everybody's money is broken, other than Bitcoiners.
That last thing there really, I think as time goes on, funnily enough, is getting missed more and more with Bitcoin of that. You can say, okay, I'm going to continue doing what I want to do because people can't stop my money. But that's only if you hold your Bitcoin properly. And as time goes on, we see more and more people buying the ETF or these treasury companies, which there's a place for, and people, if that's what they want to invest in my opinion, once they've got that core chunk of Bitcoin in self-custody held correctly. You said it just made sense to you when you started realizing these things. Did you realize these things before Bitcoin came along, or did Bitcoin make you realize these things?
Bitcoin taught me. So when I first bought Bitcoin, I was just like, oh, look at the growth of Bitcoin, I'll buy some. It was just number go up, same as everybody. You come in it for the money, you think it's going to outperform everything else, or you think it's going to at least be worth a bet, worth a punt. That's how people start. I'm going to put in $1,000 and I want it to turn into $2,000. And then if it doesn't go that way, they sell and they walk away and they don't bother learning about what they invested in. So I started that way. And so the first time I bought Bitcoin, I think was like $3,000 or $4,000 a coin. And I bought some, I think it went to 20 or something like that. I sold some, and then and this might have been 2017, 18 or something around that time. I don't know the timing exactly, but it was around that 2018 that I started to go, hang on, this is actually something I need to learn more about. And then I bought more, and then I started to learn more, and then I bought more. And then in COVID, I was looking at Bitcoin, it had gone from 69 to 20, or down to 15, I think, at one point, US I'm talking about. And at this time, I already had a stack, and I already was quite a deep understanding, and I owned all these buildings. And so I took out a few $1 million against my buildings and bought Bitcoin when it was down then, which really increased my stack a bit as well.
Just a bit.
Yeah. Well, the bank was giving me money at 2% or 3%. So for every $1 million that I took, I needed 20 or 30 grand, and the tenants were paying for the interest. So, because I owned the buildings, so I took a loan against the buildings at 3%, 30 grand for every $1 million. And when you look at Bitcoin and you go, well, it's got a CAGR of over time of, let's say, 30, 40%. That's 300 to 400 grand a year in growth on every $1 million, and the bank will float it for you at 30 to 40 grand, which the tenant will pay for from the rent.
No
so I basically salary sacrificed, my rent to get leverage for pure Bitcoin. And so that obviously worked out pretty well for me as well. Yeah, I mean, but to get to that point, anybody could have done that, but they didn't. Anybody who had real estate, right? And there's lots of people, but you need conviction. And the only way to get conviction is through deep research. And so I spent hours and hours every day. Like during COVID, I lived in my beautiful home. I lived in a 7-story building, one per floor on the Gold Coast, and I used to go up and down the internal fire staircase every morning for exercise, and I'd have my headphones in listening to Anthony Pompliano, Michael Saylor, all these guys, right? And Saylor was just at the start of his Bitcoin journey at that time. I put my entire superannuation into MSTR right at the start and like 10x'd my super as well. But yeah, so deep understanding. But what got me is really understanding that Bitcoin is a $2 trillion asset in a universe of $1,000 trillion of assets, or a quadrillion dollars. So you have the best performing asset in the world ever, right? Which is Bitcoin, almost every year since its inception, taking up the equivalent of 20 cents on a $100 note of assets globally. How many of those assets are going to want to move from real estate, bonds, stocks, gold, which are all inferior to the simplicity and performance of Bitcoin? And then you look at Bitcoin and go, well, unlike a stock or unlike real estate or unlike anything in the known universe, you cannot make more of it. So it is the only finite asset in existence, period. And you have the best performer at 20 cents to $100, or 2 trillion of a quadrillion dollars. So in my mind, over time, as the world gets smarter and wakes up to this, they're going to realize, holy shit, Bitcoin is the life raft, and I need to get my family on that life raft.
Sean Clark, Good Day Bitcoin, I speak to him often, and he thinks there's only a couple years left for people to get Bitcoin in self-custody. He thinks that you'll still be able to buy your Bitcoins, participate in the number go up, but the banks are going to custody it, or whomever. Have you thought much about this, and what are your thoughts on timelines in terms of, I'm not even interested in number go up actually, it's more the sovereignty side of things and how people can actually buy Bitcoin.
I haven't spoken to Sean about that particular argument. I have seen that floated around. I think governments would love to obviously have as much control as possible of this stuff, and it's always the on-ramps and the off-ramps that are the obvious pinch points for government control. I guess they would have to somehow make it illegal to have your own self-custody set up somehow. I don't know how they would do that. I think there'd always be a place in the world where they're going to honour. That's why I'm moving to Panama, because they are one of the least interfering governments in the world. I'm buying a home there and setting up a base there. And I think people with money will always move if the rules get changed. In short, I haven't thought about it too much, but I do think there's real merit in having no counterparty risk. And people don't think it's real, but it's a real risk, but it is a real risk. And, you know, even MSTR to some extent, which I have exposure to, and the only reason I bought MSTR and not Bitcoin is because at the time you couldn't buy Bitcoin in my super. I had to buy a derivative, so I bought a listed stock and it worked out fine. But at the end of the day, who knows what the future is for MSTR? Maybe the US government is going to come along and say, we're going to privatize MicroStrategy. You get to be insanely rich, but we're taking it all, because he operates within the confines of the United States. So his counterparty risk may be the US government. Who knows? Whereas I own a stock in MSTR, but I don't own any of the Bitcoin directly. I don't have any of the keys directly, right? So, but I think that, you know, for people who are on this journey, I think about, just for the average listener, there's so many vectors to why Bitcoin is better, but for just one that people can understand is, when you go to National Australia Bank, where are your audience? Are they Aussies or where are they?
Aussies and the UK predominantly, yeah.
Okay. So if you go into your bank, let's say for Australia, National Australia Bank, and, you know, you put the card in the wall and it gives you a number and tells you how much money in there, that's just a ledger. But it's a ledger that's controlled by a bank, which is controlled by the government under which it works, right? But it's just a ledger keeping count that is centralized. It's sitting on National Australia Bank servers wherever they are in the world. Bitcoin, you can, you know, put in your password into your wallet, and you can see your own ledger on a decentralized ledger that is kept by independent node operators globally. There is no centralized power keeping score, and the only time you pay to interact is when you want to get a transaction verified, when you want to move Bitcoin from one place to the other. I paid somebody a couple of grand in Bitcoin a few days ago, and it cost me 13 cents or something, and I could pay more if I wanted it to go faster. People say, well, why are you paying it? Who gets the money? Well, the miners, right? The people who've got machines that are consuming real world energy and have real world expense. You pay a small amount of money on a user basis. I pay nothing at all until I actually want to do a transaction. And when I do want to do a transaction, I make a small donation to a miner to verify and encode that transaction on the next block. That is a better ledger. Tell me that's not a better ledger than paying account keeping fees to a corrupt organization such as a bank, which gets to enslave people into multi-generational debt and charge them interest on money that they don't even have. Why would you want to participate in that when you have Bitcoin? I can store millions of dollars of Bitcoin for free every month. I pay a tiny amount when I want to send money to somebody, and other than that, I get left alone. And I get to move where I want without any threat of a government saying, we're going to take your money, we're going to censor your money, we're going to censor you. No, you're not. Not me.
Yeah, it is absolutely wild, and I got reminded of it again for the first time in a while. I usually only accept Bitcoin, but I was helping a friend out, and he had money set up in a bank account that we both, funny enough, a few years ago set up because we wanted this decentralization of bank accounts. But he had his last bit of money in there, so he said, can I pay you that rather than Bitcoin? I said, sure thing. He needed permission he had to message his banker to send money out of his account. They then had to confirm that, and he had to pay a $60 fee just to send money, his own money, out of his bank account. And then I think it was over the weekend or a Friday before he tried to do it. So it's now Wednesday, time of recording, and he'd started this before last weekend, and it's still not been processed. It's absolutely wild.
And the thing that gets me, Finn, about that is not the gross inefficiency, but this is stealing literally your life. Like that money he got from giving up a percentage of his life. And the banks feel justified to take these bites out of your life. And to me, I cannot abide by that, you know. In Cyprus, one of the reasons I decided it's not going to be my permanent tax base is the same thing. I went on with the Bank of Cyprus. I had to open it for my immigration and my visa and all the things that I had to get to officially leave Australia. And they said, oh, you've got to do a call with us when you start. Just an orientation call, just so you know how the Bank of Cyprus works. I said, no problem. When's a good time to call? I said, this time. So they call me. And then I look at my account statement a month later. It was 25 euros for the call. The compulsory call, $50, right, Aussie. It's 25 euros to send money or take money. It's out of control. And if I want to send any money over 5,000 euro, I have to tell them it's coming. Not that it's leaving. I have to tell them when somebody's going to be putting money into my bank account. And they charge me for all this. And I'm just like, this is just absurd, right? Whereas in Panama, public servants get paid in Bitcoin. I'm like, I'm going. The whole
Count
system,
me in.
the best, like Andrew Tate said it best. He said the best part about having money is not having a Lamborghini or fancy things. It's not having to put up with bullshit or people that you don't want to put up with. And you just don't. You just say, I'm out of here. I don't have anything to lose. You're not going to make any difference to my life whether you're in it or not. So that's the best part about making money. It's just being able to choose where you go and how you live. And poor people don't understand it. They think, tax the rich. No, the rich will just leave. And the same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoiners are going to be the new rich, and they're just going to go where they're treated best, as Andrew Henderson at Nomad says, Nomad Capitalist. And that's Bitcoin. It's going to be that thing. And these days, every investment I look at, I measure against Bitcoin. I go, well, Bitcoin is the hurdle rate. People say, why did you sell your commercial buildings? I sold all my commercial buildings, all my real estate, multi-8 figures of real estate, right? The only asset I have is a commercial asset with a couple of hundred tenants on it. And that's because I own it with somebody else in Australia. Other than that, I sold everything. And people go, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, with Bitcoin, I don't get any phone calls. I don't get electricity bills. I don't get leaking roofs. The growth rate outperforms real estate by a mile. I can go wherever I want. I'm not going to get overtaxed because the government's going to, we run out of money. Okay, we're going to introduce this new tax on rich property owners. That's where it's going, mate. You know, that's where it's going, especially in places like Australia. Look at what's happening in New York City right now with Mandani in power. It's wild. Socialism's on the rise. That just basically means get the pitchforks out, we're coming for the rich. And you don't have to be that rich. As if the rich got it for free without sacrifice. Man, I sacrificed a lot to get to where I am. So I want to be portable, mobile. I want technologies that support my values. Bitcoin defunds war. Bitcoin, if the US government couldn't print money, how many bombs would they be dropping all over the world?
Two things there is that the common person, the normal person, doesn't realize how much the wealthy actually contribute. And then in terms of Bitcoin, like you said, the amount of good that Bitcoin does that people just don't realize as well, beyond the number go up. If we can fix the money, how different the world is going to look. For the Gen Z listening that are scratching their head, feeling a bit stuck, what would 3 actionable bits of advice that they can take away and go and do be?
I think first thing of those 3 actionable bits is get employed or get in a place where you can make some money, whether it be in sales or anything to start with. Just secure some income. And then the second thing is start investing while you figure out your mission or what it is you want to do, what it is you want to love and do long term. But I really think that for this generation, you are sitting at the precipice of probably the largest transformation in the business world and perhaps the world in the history of humanity. And your opportunities to grow your wealth are greater than any generation before you. If you can, for example, Bitcoin, I think is going to do very well over the next 5 or 10 years. I think Tesla is going to do, not financial advice, I'm just giving you an example. I think Tesla is extremely well positioned. I think Alphabet, which is Google, and Microsoft, and perhaps Nvidia, these companies are positioned to take advantage in a very big way of this enormous transformation of humankind over the next 10 years, not over the next 20 or 30, just the next 10 is going to see the world is just about to be stopped and then spun the other way. And when those types of events occur, they usually take longer than what you're going to see this one take, but huge amounts of money are made. And even an everyday person that is just able to free up 20 grand a year by just living cheap, earning a bit more, and then investing it all like what you did, Finn, those guys are, over 10 years are going to see that 20 grand a year turn them into multimillionaires because they invested in not what the government says, which is, invest in the superannuation because it's tax effective. You can shove that right up your ass. That is the biggest scam ever. You have to be proactive, deeply educated in those companies that are at the forefront and stand to benefit the most from the enormous disruption that is on our doorstep. Disruption of money, Bitcoin wins. Disruption of labor, Tesla wins, right? Disruption of AI, it's going to be Microsoft, or it's going to be Google, or it's going to be Grok, or Tesla again, somewhere in there. Starlink is probably going to do okay, probably not for retail investors when they come in at $1.5 trillion, but so I think get employed, live cheap, invest hard. Those are my 3 things. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurship is risky. If I was to do it again, get employed somehow or start a business somehow, live in a tax effective, low cost place, and then invest like a maniac.
Simple. Adam, thanks so much for jumping on. Last thing, where can people find you? You personally, Unemployable?
So to answer those questions, Unemployable is our podcast. We basically talk about this kind of stuff, investing for aggressive growth stock focused investors or growth investors, whether it's Bitcoin, Tesla, AI, we talk about that all the time, and starting your own business. And we sometimes interview politicians and hear what they've got to say. Usually not much worth hearing. So that's the podcast. You can find it by searching Unemployable Media on Spotify, YouTube, any of the major platforms. And you can follow me personally, Adam Hudson Official on Instagram. Haven't been active on there much this year. I'm just reassessing where I want to take it this year. But Adam Hudson Official, you know it's the right one when you've got about 100,000 followers there, because there is a few fakes as well.
I'll put that in the description for everyone that's listening still to this point. Adam, thanks for joining. And guys, we'll see you on the next one.